Now, as if Donald Trump wasn't the centre of enough controversy, there are calls for his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame to be removed.
And is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500 stars, coral pink stars, embedded in for nearly a mile and a half, and is made up of more than 2,500.
Beautiful.
Click. Saturday at 8:30 on BBC News and iPlayer.
One of the world's biggest car makers, Ford, warns the UK government that pushing back a ban on sales of Karabakh, where it's been trying to take full control of the disputed territory. A Metropolitan Police officer is to be charged over the death of Chris Cabba. He was shot in South London in September last year. And King Charles and Queen Camilla are to visit Paris and Bordeaux as part of a 3-day state visit to France.
Yes, Emmanuel Macron will greet King Charles here at the Arc de Triomphe. The bands are playing, the roads have just been closed, not long to wait now.
Hello and welcome, I'm Samantha Simmons. One of the world's biggest car makers, Ford, has warned the UK government that pushing back a ban on sales of new petrol and diesel cars to 2035 would undermine business certainty. It comes after the BBC revealed that the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, is considering a major shift on key climate action policies. The chair of car manufacturing giant Ford UK has hit out, criticising the government's announcement. She has said the UK 2030 target is a vital catalyst to accelerate Ford into a cleaner future. Our business needs 3 things from the UK government: ambition, commitment and consistency. A relaxation of 2030 would undermine all 3. Here's Mike Hawes, Chief Executive of the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders.
As you would probably expect, a great deal of concern. The industry has invested billions in this transition. A lot of it has gone into the UK already, and the government has backed that. You've seen them invest in Tata's battery factory in Somerset, the Mini production, electric vehicle production in Cowley, electric commercial vehicle production in Ellesmere Port. So we've got this sort of mixed messaging, and you're investing in there. If you want to attract and continue that investment, you need a strong market. So we want to see what is actually being said, because at the moment we're getting this mixed message about what is it that the government actually wants. Because I'll tell you, if you want to achieve net zero, you have to decarbonise road transport.
Well, this morning, Home Secretary Suella Braverman backed the Prime Minister for making difficult decisions on net zero and putting household costs first.
The Prime Minister is taking an approach of pragmatism and proportionality when it comes to delivering our net zero commitments. It's right that he assesses the issue as a whole, taking into account people's bank balances, livelihoods, the way that they are living their lives and the cost of living challenges that many families around the country are facing. And ultimately, we're not going to save the country by bankrupting the British people.
Well, in the past hour, Conservative MP for Middlesbrough and former Treasury Minister Simon Clarke has spoken to our Deputy Political Editor Vicky Young, calling the expected move a misstep by the government.
Well, my reaction this morning is one of real concern, because clearly, whilst we need to see the details of the Prime Minister's speech, what has been trailed suggests a significant change in our policy. That policy is not some arbitrary target. It is the basis on which major companies across the United Kingdom, in fields from the car industry to the wider energy sector, are investing billions of pounds and hopefully creating tens of thousands of jobs. That is now, I would argue, in peril because of what feels like an unnecessary political misstep and a misreading of where the British people are on this issue.
The opposition Labour Party have condemned the proposed changes by the government, and the BBC understands that the party is set to commit to reinstating the 2030 ban on the sale of new petrol and diesel cars. The Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones, was speaking to the BBC this morning.
But most importantly, this is more risk for the British economy and British business. These targets are important so that British businesses know how to invest in their workforce and their factories. Government has been signing off hundreds of millions of pounds of taxpayer subsidy to help businesses get ready for these long-held changes. And now Rishi Sunak is U-turning via leaks and midnight statements from the bunker at Downing Street. I mean, it's not how you run a country.
Let's speak to Damien Grammaticus, our political correspondent. Damien, this policy or pushback on the policy hasn't even been announced, and there's been a huge reaction.
Well, I think what you're seeing is sort of scrambling on all sides because, as you say, these were leaks that came out through the BBC yesterday of what the government was considering. Not actually seems to have been completely decided on yet. Held very tightly, it appears, at the sort of heart of Downing Street. So car industry, MPs like Simon Clarke, others all unaware that this was this big shift in policy, and it is a really big shift in policy if it happens, as being sort of is in the offing. And when that leaked out, even Downing Street, I think, caught on the hop. So everyone's been scrambling to catch up. And what you see there, Labour Party too, reacting to this, so a little unclear at first, but seems to have been since that interview, which you played a clip from there of Darren Jones, the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury. So he speaks on sort of money issues for Labour. What he has said a little later this morning was that the Labour Party, even if the Conservatives scrapped or pushed back that target for banning sale of all new petrol and diesel cars. 2030 it is at the minute. If they pushed it back to 2035, which seems a possibility, that Labour would reinstate it, pull it forward again to 2030. Now, that's important, I think, because a couple of things. Number one, the Labour Party clearly have listened to what companies like Ford have been saying, and they too have been, trying to grapple with this and come out and formulate their own responses. Very strong response from Ford this morning. So Ford saying, that the Rishi Sunak, it said, they said he lacked ambition, commitment, and consistency. They needed consistent policies to shape their business plans. Labour seemed to respond to that, saying they would keep those targets. So first of all, responding to what I think they're hearing from industries. Secondly, in sort of political terms, what's quite interesting is that Labour's deciding to get out and sort of formulate that distinctive policy, which would put it at odds with the government if the government shift and create a dividing line. But clearly Labour believes there's electoral advantage. The government, it seems, must feel that there are reasons for wanting this change, that not just sort of perhaps economic, as Suella Braverman was saying, but electoral perhaps too. But you heard Simon Clarke. He is a sort of senior MP from those seats which the Conservatives seized from Labour Party last time round. He is warning he doesn't think this adds up for the Conservatives politically.
OK, Damien in Westminster, thank you. Thank you, Damien, that in Westminster. Breaking news here in the UK. In the past hour, the Crown Prosecution Service say they are to bring a charge of murder against a Metropolitan Police officer over the death of Chris Cabba. Chris Cabba was hit by a single bullet in Streatham Hill in South London in September last year. The police officer, who has not been named at this stage, will appear at Westminster Magistrates Court tomorrow. Live now to our reporter Greg Mackenzie, who's at New Scotland Yard. And Greg, I know you've been following this story from the very start. Just remind us of the background to this, who Chris Cabba was, what happened to him.
Well, Chris Cabba was a father-to-be, a 24-year-old black man who was fatally shot on the 5th of September in Streatham. Now, following his death, the Independent Office for Police Conduct launched an investigation and 6 months ago handed their evidence file to the Crown Prosecution Service for the Crown Prosecution Service to make a decision on a charging decision for the officer who fired that gun. And this morning, the Crown Prosecution Service has announced that it has authorised a charge of murder for that Metropolitan Police firearms officer in relation to the fatal shooting of Chris Cabba. Now, the family of Chris Cabba have issued a statement in the last hour, and they simply say they welcome today's decision. Now, the Metropolitan Police have also issued a statement in the last half hour, and the Deputy Assistant Commissioner Helen Millichap has said, "We have fully supported the IOPC investigation as it has worked to establish the facts." She goes on to say, today's announcement is a significant and serious development. We must now allow the court process to run its course so that it would not be appropriate for her to make any comment further at this stage. She goes on to say, our thoughts are with everyone affected by the case. Now, the officer involved will appear at Westminster Magistrates Court tomorrow.
Greg Mackenzie at New Scotland Yard, thank you. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. Let's look at some other stories making the news this hour. And the former Mayor of London, Ken Livingstone, has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. The 78-year-old was a prominent figure in London politics for more than 4 decades from the 1970s, earning the nickname Red Ken for his left-wing policies. In a statement, his family said he was being well cared for and was now living a private life. Hunter Biden, the son of President Joe Biden, will plead not guilty to 3 criminal charges relating to a gun purchase he made in 2018. Mr. Biden was charged last week for possessing a gun while he was an illegal drug user, and lying to buy it. If convicted, he could face up to 25 years in prison. The United Autos Workers Union said it would announce on Friday more plants that will strike if no serious progress is made in talks with automakers for a new contract. The UAW launched its strike against Ford, General Motors and Chrysler's parent company Stellantis last week. You're live with BBC News. Now, some breaking news. In the past hour, the ethnic Armenian leadership in the disputed territory of Nagorno-Karabakh has announced a ceasefire a day after Azerbaijan launched an offensive. It says the truce includes the complete disarmament of the local military and the withdrawal of any Armenian forces. Azerbaijan's military has been trying to take full control of the disputed territory. Just before we go any further, a quick explainer about the background to what is going on. Nagorno-Karabakh, which lies in the mountainous South Caucasus region, is at the heart of one of the world's longest-running conflicts. The territory is recognised internationally as part of Azerbaijan, but large areas of it have been controlled by ethnic Armenians for 3 decades. Azerbaijan and Armenia fought a bloody war over the territory in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Russia, which previously oversaw both countries as part of the USSR, has previously sent in peacekeepers. But fears of fresh violence came when Azerbaijan mounted an effective blockade of a vital route into the enclave in December 2022. Let's get more on this now with our correspondent in Tbilisi, Rayhan Dimitri. Rayhan, welcome to you. Tell us more about this ceasefire. The report's just coming in.
Well, what a quite rapid development of this story, Samantha. So in the last hour, we've heard that Azerbaijan and the ethnic Armenian leadership of Nagorno-Karabakh, they have reached a ceasefire agreement that was mediated by Russian peacekeepers that are stationed in Nagorno-Karabakh. And there are 3 points in this ceasefire agreement. The first one is that Nagorno-Karabakh leadership has agreed to disarm. And the second point is that they have agreed to withdraw any remaining military units and military equipment of the Armenian armed forces. That is despite all the denials that we've been hearing for days now from the Republic of Armenia, saying that it has no military presence in the region. And the third point under this ceasefire agreement is that Azerbaijan and the ethnic Armenians will meet tomorrow on Thursday in the Azeri town of Yevlakh, which is about 100 kilometers north from the regional capital of Stepanakert, to discuss the future of Karabakh Armenians living in Nagorno-Karabakh, their safety and security, and also the process of reintegration of Karabakh Armenians into Azerbaijan.
Rayhan, just put this into context for us, given this conflict has gone on for so many decades. Just how significant do you think this development is?
Well, Azerbaijani media and some of the officials have described it as a full surrender. They're saying that Karabakh Armenians have surrendered. There was no doubt that militarily Azerbaijan is so much more powerful than whatever military forces the breakaway region has had there, or its self-defense army. And some of the statements that we heard from Karabakh leadership was that they have lost some strategic heights in the past 24 hours, and they have realized that they're just incompatible militarily to fight against Azerbaijani forces. But of course, here is also the role of Russia is really important. Russia mediated this agreement, although, as I understand, for now, even though it just happened within the past hour, the leadership of the Republic of Armenia was not part of these negotiations between ethnic Armenians of Karabakh and the Republic of Azerbaijan. So it's quite a significant development. At least it means that there won't be more casualties among the civilian population. But of course, the situation is extremely difficult for ethnic Armenians. The process of reintegration, we're talking about decades of conflict and hatred that was fostered between these two nations. And this process of reintegration indeed will be extremely difficult.
Rayhan Dimitri in Tbilisi, thank you for the update. King Charles and Queen Camilla are beginning their 3-day state visit to France today. The royal couple will visit Paris and Bordeaux. Let's go live to Lewis Vaughan-Jones, who is in Paris and following the visit. Lewis, over to you.
Thank you, Samantha. Yeah, welcome to the Arc de Triomphe. Just in the last few minutes, the roads have gone quite quiet around here. They've just been closed off, getting ready for Emmanuel Macron to welcome King Charles. Let's take a look at the plan for the day. It will start here at the Arc de Triomphe, where there will be a poignant formal ceremony. The King will be invited to take part of the rekindling of the flame, as it's known, laying a wreath to remembering those who lost their lives in the First and Second World Wars. Once this ceremony is finished, there'll be a fly past, and then it will be on to the Élysée, Paris, the presidential palace, and there will be a bilateral meeting, basically just a conversation between President Macron and King Charles. And then on into the evening, it's the state banquet at the Palace of Versailles, a very formal affair, as you can imagine. Why that location? Well, it is a nod, we are told, to Queen Elizabeth II's visit there. She visited in 1972 and before that in the 50s as well. We're expecting to hear toasts from both men at that point. So that gives you an idea of the outline of the plan of attack for today. It's a moment to reflect on not only the relationship today, but also the history between France and the UK. I just want to hear the thoughts now of Stefan Byrne, royal commentator. Let's take a listen.
I mean, the Queen was the only country she loved except the Commonwealth was France. She came because she remembered when she came first in '48 on the bateau mouche on the Seine with her husband. It was a honeymoon, and then she loved our wine, champagne, and also horses. She came very often to see the haras, les haras du Pin, Mottry, and she visited with the Queen Mother. She visited the castles. You know, don't forget the Queen Mother was Scottish, and we have the old alliance with Scotland, and and she spoke French perfectly. The King Charles speaks French quite well, but with a stronger accent when he speaks French. But he loves France, but he shares his love with France with Italy and Greece. So we prefer, it was an exclusive love for France, but still, he likes France. He has been here for more than 70 times. I mean, 70 times in all his life. He came to France for different subjects. And I think that the state visit will be a success.
So the sun has just come out here. Plenty of people here will be hoping it is a success. Let me just show you around a little bit. This is the Police building, which if you know Paris, you may know it. And the Champs-Élysées is just down below us. And as I mentioned, they've closed the roads now. You can see the police presence. The reason I'm showing you the Champs-Élysées is because this is where King Charles and President Macron will head down. Once they finish at the Arc de Triomphe, they will head down here because We can't quite see it here, but the Elysee Palace is just off down there to the left, and that's where they will be for the next stage and those bilateral talks where they will have conversations about, we're told, that strengthening of ties between the UK and France, particularly important, of course, since Brexit. There is felt like there is still lots of work to do. They will talk about defence issues, environment, climate change. All these kind of themes will be coming up, not just in that meeting, but throughout the day today and tomorrow. And you may remember that this is actually a rescheduled trip. This was all supposed to take place 6 months ago. It was the intention that France would be the first state visit. Ended up being Germany. Why? Well, because you may remember President Macron at that point 6 months ago was pushing through pension reforms. They weren't particularly popular with many people in France. There were protests, and it was seen just impossible to make a state visit at that time work. So instead, the king headed to Germany, but now he is heading to France to finish the unfinished business.
Lewis, thank you very much. Plenty more from Lewis as that visit gets underway. For now, though, thank you. Hundreds of teenagers across the UK have told a survey for the BBC they want social media and technology companies to do more to stop pornography appearing while they're on social media or gaming sites. More than a third of 13 to 18-year-olds questioned said they'd seen pornography online, including when it appeared without them seeking it out. Anxiety was also a feature of life, with a large proportion saying they feel anxious some or most of the time. Live now to BBC Radio 5 Live's Lucy Gray from the Midlands Arts Centre in Birmingham, who has more on this. Lucy.
Hi, Samantha. Yeah, hi. I think from that survey that you mentioned, we spoke to 2,000 young people between the ages of 13 to 18. And I think what's really striking is the role that sexual images are playing in their lives, but also the dominance of social media. They're really living their lives through their phones. You were speaking there about the pornography, more than a third saying that they'd seen it, and especially accidentally, 73% saying they wanted tech companies and social media companies to do more to stop them seeing pornography when they're on gaming sites or when they're on social media, and it just appearing without them seeking it out. We also heard a lot about this exchanging of sexual images and also the reliance on their phone, the anxiety that they feel when they're not having their phone with them. So more than a half said they feel actually anxious if they don't have their phone with them. We've got more than 100 teenagers here at the Midlands Arts Centre in Birmingham talking to us today on the BBC about the issues facing them. I've got two people who've been inside that theatre talking for 2 hours, haven't you? You've done very well to last, and thank you very much for coming out to talk to me now. So Summer, you're 16, and Habiba at 18. We're talking generally about the issues affecting young people. What is it that you've been saying is the big issue for you at the moment?
I feel like there are so many influencers on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and even YouTube sometimes that think that they have this power and dominance over communities and the social hierarchy because of where they stand on that hierarchy. And I think that younger people, especially our kind of ages, and even younger, I know that I've got little brothers that kind of believe the same things as this one influencer does. And I think it's really going to be damaging to us growing up later in life, and I'm really scared to see what kind of a community that, like, not even just the UK, like the world as a whole, what it will become in 20, 30 years' time, just because of things that we've seen now, like in our prime early days on social media. You're
seeing a direct impact from the influencers on your friends, are you?
Yeah, definitely. Even like when I was in high school and things like that, the boys, like, it was just the amount of disrespect that they had for like female teachers and things like that. And I'm not just saying that it's men doing this, it can also be girls. Like, I know that there was something going around in COVID where it was like really horrible towards men that girls were saying, and they made it like a trend. And I know that it was really harmful towards like boys' mental health, because they felt kind of like worthless at the end of the day because of these things that girls were saying about them.
Yeah, what about you, Habiba?
I think the main topic, in my opinion, was the romanticization of like depression, eating disorders, and the beauty standards. I feel like the expectations are being put on the younger generation, and it's kind of being forced upon, especially younger girls, in my opinion. Obviously, I'm not saying males, it doesn't happen to males, but I'm saying that I've noticed with girls as well, you expect to dress a certain way, act a certain way. And in regards of eating disorders, I feel like every time I see a post on Instagram or TikTok, it's always, I haven't ate this, I haven't ate today, I haven't ate this much. And it's almost like saying, don't eat. And I feel like that's not what you should be teaching kids, because as kids, you're still growing, you're still learning, you're still developing. And I feel like what they don't realize is you're not teaching these kids, you're killing them, you're harming them, and it's not fair.
It's too much and too much power. OK, well, thank you so much for talking to us, Samahan and Habiba. I know there are a lot of pressures facing you, but just to mention from this survey, one positive that came out of it was that 2/3 of the young people we spoke to did say that they feel positive about their future. So a little note of optimism to end on there, Samantha.
Lucy, thank you very much. Some breaking news to bring you coming in from our political editor, Chris Mason, who says that he understands that Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, is hosting a conference call right now with his cabinet to discuss his plans on green targets. This is after the BBC broke the news last night that Rishi Sunak is considering weakening key green policies, including rowing back on their 2030 commitment to ban the sale of diesel and petrol cars by 2030. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has defended the Prime Minister's approach today to green policies as pragmatic after we heard this news yesterday. But there's been criticism from not least the car industry as well. The head of Ford UK criticising the government. But Ms Braverman said the government could not tackle climate change by bankrupting the British people. Labour appear to have said, or we think that they would, if the government rows back on this commitment, pushes the ban to 2035. We understand that Labour would reinstate it to 2030. So that news from our political editor that Rishi Sunak is holding a conference call right now on this. Stay with us for the latest.
Hello. It's been a windy and for some thoroughly soggy few days out there, especially across the hills of Cumbria and Gwynedd, where some spots have seen well over half a month's worth of rainfall in little over a day. And there's going to be more in the way of rain over the next few days, but there'll become more downpours in that there'll be highly variable amounts of rain around, some sunshine in between, but still, for some of you, strong winds. Now, some of the wettest and windiest conditions for the rest of today tied in with this cold front moving its way eastwards across England and Wales. It's not one coherent band of rain. The rain may be on and off as that comes its way through, but still some very heavy bursts around across southern counties of England, the Midlands, towards East Anglia, and eventually the southeast. And there will be leaving a lot of surface water and spray around on the roads as we head into the evening rush hour, still with gusts in the southeast 40-50 miles an hour. Better end to the day in the north and west of England and Wales. Only a few showers, a bit more sunshine, certainly compared with the morning, but showers across Scotland, Northern Ireland, with some wetter weather in the South Highlands and the strongest of the winds, maybe gusting 50-60 miles an hour by this stage, making it feel fresh. And for all of us, temperatures this afternoon and evening only a little bit up on where they were this morning. Now, the evening rush hour, not very pleasant at all, East Anglia, southeast. That rain does clear away, though, during the early hours of tomorrow morning. More rain, though, to the north and west of Scotland, in between, with lighter winds, 1 or 2 showers, but more in the way of clear skies. A cooler start to tomorrow morning, 4 or 5 degrees in some rural areas, but a bright and sunny one for the most part. A few showers dotted around these coasts of England and Wales before a few more brew later, especially in southern counties. Scotland, Northern Ireland, greater chance of some outbreaks of rain, initially in the north and west, pushing their way southwards and eastwards and those strong to gale force winds, and that will make it feel cool here, and indeed for all of us cooler than we've been used to for some time. Then as we go through the night and into Friday, our area of low pressure that's been governing things the past few days still there to the northeast of Scotland. Strongest the winds around that through north and west Scotland, Northern Ireland. Blustery day here with frequent showers. Showers in western parts of England and Wales. Elsewhere, dry and bright start with some sunshine, a little on the cool side to begin with, and a cool day all in all. But showers will blossom more widely through the afternoon, some of those on the heavy side. As they fade though into Friday night, we go into Saturday morning, clear and cool. There could be a touch of frost in some sheltered Scottish glens. Bright, dry day for many, but cloud increasing later. Some more wet and windy weather on Sunday.
Up to 10,000 Ukrainian prisoners of war are believed to remain in Russian captivity, a violation of the rules of war.
Lucy Letby has been found guilty of murdering 7 babies in her care. It makes her the most prolific killer of children in modern times in the UK.
John Goodwin is now on his way to space on Virgin Galactic. How are you going to top this?
I suppose I've got to go to the moon.
More than just the headlines. The BBC News Channel. Watch on iPlayer.
Morning. Come and have a seat. Now, of course, I'm not going to go easy on you. There are some really big questions we've got to try and get answers to this morning. But I'll be fair, and we just want to hear what you've got to say. So, shall we get on with it?
We're rolling.
Here we go. Join me to hear from the biggest names inside and outside politics.
Sunday with Laura Koonsberg. Sundays at 9 on BBC One and iPlayer.
Margaret Atwood, welcome to This Cultural Life. Some of the world's leading artistic figures revealed to me their influences.
Music is part of our culture, dance is part of our culture.
And the experiences that have inspired their own work.
The people around me never said you can't do this.
I was totally in love with Monk.
Now I'm blushing. Find out what fires the creative imagination with John Wilson. This Cultural Life. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
A surprise fall in the UK inflation rate to 6.7% in August, but will this ease pressure on interest rate rises? And car companies, including Ford, have condemned the UK government's suggestions that it will delay the ban on new petrol and diesel cars by 2030. Hello and welcome to World Business Report. I'm Laquessa Burek. So let's start in the UK, where the latest inflation numbers have been published, showing a surprise fall in the rate at which prices are rising to 6.7% in the year to August. Now that compares to 6.8% in July. Analysts had expected the inflation rate to actually increase. Price rises for milk, cheese and eggs slowed the most, whilst fish and vegetable prices also eased. There was also a drop in hotel and airfare costs, although fuel prices jumped. Now, the rate is still way above the Bank of England's 2% target. On Tuesday, the OECD forecasts that the UK will have the highest rate of inflation this year within the G7. And as you can see just here, the rate of inflation hit a peak of 11.1% in October of last year and have been slowly, very slowly coming down since then. So in an effort to help slow price rises, the Bank of England has increased interest rates 14 times to 5.25%. They are meeting again on Thursday, and analysts predict that the cost of borrowing will rise once more by 0.25 percentage point to 5.5% in an effort to tame the sticky inflation. Now, we are going to get an expert view on all of this in a moment. First off, let's have a look at how the impact of inflation is being felt by businesses and, of course, consumers. Darshini David has the report.
At this chain of cafe bars, a 30% increase in food bills has meant some unpalatable choices for the boss in Plymouth.
Typically, in normal years, we'd increase our prices by around 1.5–2%. This last year, we've increased our prices by 8%. And so thinking about our burger and fries, so we do an excellent burger and fries. That used to be £9.95 here, and that's now £10.95 on the menu.
But they've still been able to expand. Customers, helped perhaps by pandemic savings or wage rises, have swallowed the higher prices as they treat themselves after the lockdown years.
We've seen no kind of examples of people trading down or changing the way that they behave, and we're pretty representative. We trade throughout Wales and England in all sorts of different towns and high streets. And now, as I said, we've seen no shift in behaviour. And what you would typically expect if people were tightening their belts is you'd see fewer people out at the start of the week. You'd see less spending as you approach payday, and then a concentration of spending around payday. And those are the things that we look for when we're looking at the data, and we haven't seen any of that.
Shops, bars, restaurants, even hairdressers, because some of their customers are feeling flush, they're able to push up prices. And those prices make up part of what's called core inflation. That's higher than the Bank of England would like to see. That might mean there's another increase in interest rates tomorrow, even though overall inflation is weaker than it was at the end of last year.
Higher global oil prices, however, have pushed up petrol prices on the forecourt once again, meaning inflation is a bit more stubborn than it may have been.
We've seen since the beginning of August, petrol go up by 10 pence a litre and diesel by 13p. That's added £5.50 to filling up an average family petrol car and £7 if you're driving a diesel.
And while some items on the weekly shop are getting cheaper, food prices remain much higher than a year ago, as retailers too grapple with higher costs. The pain from this cost of living crisis isn't over yet. Darshini David, BBC News.
Well, let's get more analysis on those latest inflation numbers. I'm joined now by Thais Hayer, who is a sector economist at ING. Thais, lovely to have you with us here on World Business Report. Let's just stick with the inflation figure that is really affecting people at home, and that is food prices. What exactly is going on there?
Yeah, so if I look at food prices in the UK, you clearly see that the rate of growth is slowing down over the last couple of months. But still, if you compare food prices with, for example, 2 years ago, food prices are 30% up the price of like regular groceries. And I would say the latest figure is still a bit disappointing for consumers because food prices have increased a little bit in August compared to July, for example, due to higher prices of pasta, chocolate and sugar.
Now, there is always this lag, isn't there, between interest rates and the way it filters through finally at the till. Why is it taking so long for consumer prices to react?
Yeah, well, in some cases, you see that the agricultural commodity prices, which have come down in general by 25% compared to their peak last year, have also led to lower prices at the supermarkets. So you see this in milk prices. There it's most clearly visible. However, lower prices of vegetable oils on the world market haven't yet led to a decrease in prices of margarine. So there's clearly a lag there.
OK, Thais Hayer, we'll leave it there for now from ING. Thank you very much indeed. We're going to stay in the UK, and car companies have been condemning reports that the British Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, is considering delaying a ban on the sale of new petrol and diesel cars currently scheduled for 2030. Now, the chair of Ford UK said that this would undermine the steps the US car manufacturer had taken to prepare for the change. Let's get the latest on this from our business editor, Simon Jack. So just update us on what is being suggested, Simon.
Well, this target to ban the sale of new petrol and diesel cars in 2030 was put in place about 10 years ago. And there's been a bit of a race to try and get ready for it. Some of people thinking they weren't going to be prepared for it, some straining every sinew to try and get ready. The manufacturer you just mentioned there, Ford, said our business needs three things from the UK government: ambition, commitment and consistency. A relaxation of the 2030 target would undermine all three. The expectation is it'll be put back to 2035. Other reaction is a bit more nuanced. Jaguar Land Rover said, remember, they get a lot of their money from big diesel and petrol, things like Range Rovers and Land Rovers, said its net zero plans are on track and it would welcome certainty around legislation. And the industry trade body said it's going to affect consumer behaviour as well. The concern now is, does this cause consumers to delay their purchase of an electric car? Because for some time, whether it was going to be met or not, it's been a bit of a guiding star for manufacturers, the infrastructure, the charging point installers, and indeed consumers have all been fixed on this date, which now looks almost certain to change to 2035. I should say a group saying that it represents Drivers Fair for UK said the policy was always doomed to be dropped adding it, hoping its pushed back date would enable breathing space to get it scrapped completely. So big changes there for the automotive industry. I've been speaking to some of the people who install the infrastructure, and they say although it's not a seismic shift, some of these manufacturing plans and installing plans have very long lead times and very long lifespans of their project, and it wasn't a seismic shift to 2030 to 2035. It brings it in line, for example, with France and Germany, but it has definitely will change consumer behaviour in the short term, and is a big change and a big political change, which shows that the ruling Conservative Party in the UK thinks that the cost associated with some of these net zero ambitions is something that relaxing them a little bit, give people a bit more breathing space, will be electorally popular. It remains to be seen, because younger voters perhaps would see this as a bad day in their net zero ambitions.
Okay, Simon, thank you very much indeed. More analysis now, and joining me is James Atwood, who is the acting magazine editor at Autocar. James, great to have you here. So mixed reaction perhaps there, just hearing from Simon Jack. What is the feeling about what this U-turn, if it is announced, will mean for the automotive industry?
I think a mixed reaction is right. I think the biggest thing that the automotive industry wants, and to some extent consumers want, is certainty. They have long lead times, they have huge amounts of investment, and I think anything that kind of casts doubt and stuff when they're looking and they're planning sort of 5-10 years ahead just kind of adds confusion. And I think since this policy was sort of first announced in 2020, there's always been a kind of element of uncertainty over exactly how it would work and how the timeline will unfold. So I think what we're seeing at this point is when manufacturers are really looking to invest heavily in kind of electric cars now, is they just sort of want the certainty of guidance. They know where best to put their money and when.
What about guidance for consumers? Because there have been many analysts saying that this is short-term gain for longer-term pain for consumers when it comes to those choices in buying their next car. What would your advice be?
I think that, yeah, the challenge for consumers is that there has been this tremendous uncertainty. People don't know whether they should be buying a hybrid car or a plug-in hybrid or a full electric car. I think the worry is that by pushing this back for another 5 years, at a point when the government had already said that some hybrids would be allowed after 2030 anyway, but never said it out, that by putting that back, you just maybe just delay the confusion and you just extend that and prolong that. So I think what's important is that if 2035 is the new date, that we kind of need to think about whether we sort of having, kind of education campaigns and sort of things that we can do to kind of get people to sort of understand how electric cars are different from sort of petrol and diesel cars, some of the benefits and kind of how best they can use them. And we probably also need a further push to really help that infrastructure develop. Sort of charging infrastructure is kind of one of the big challenges. It's been improving rapidly in recent years, but there's still kind of more steps that we can take. And I think every kind of time someone installs a big new bank of EV chargers on the motorway or kind of in lampposts in the town, that's kind of going to give more confidence to consumers who are kind of thinking about whether they can go electric or not.
James Atwood from Autocar, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, in other news now, and China's imports of seafood from Japan slumped last month following the decision by Tokyo to release treated wastewater from the damaged Fukushima nuclear power plant. China's customs authorities said that imports fell 67.6% in August compared with the same month last year. Shares in Disney dipped by more than 3% in trading after it announced it would nearly double its spending on theme parks, resorts and cruise liners, investing some $60 billion over the next decade. And just very quickly, hopefully we can bring the markets up for you. But I think one of the main top lines is that as that inflation figure was announced this morning here in the UK, it's been interesting to see how the markets have reacted, yet to see what is going to take place in the US, of course, awaiting that Fed announcement on their interest rates later today. But essentially, sterling dropped somewhat once that announcement had been announced. Plenty more coming up here on World Business Report. I shall see you later.
BBC News, bringing you different stories from across the UK.
This heavy machinery is working to protect the wildlife that lives and relies on this internationally important nature reserve, famous for its freshwater habitats. But now it's a race against time to stop it being flooded by the sea.
It's one of the first points that birds actually come across on their migration. It's the first bit of land they see, so they want to come here, they want to get a rest, feed, drink.
The storms moved the shingle bank and blocked it. So now, along this line, they plan to build a new drain further inland.
If we move the new cut in the 100, 150 yards or so that we're doing, then we should be able to protect the freshwater habitat here from saline sturgeon for hopefully up to the next 100 years.
Well, we've got black-tailed godwits here now, we've got little stints, curlew sandpipers, green sandpipers.
Bernard Bishop was the warden here for more than 40 years.
Well, I suppose you could say I'm excited by it. Never thought I'd see this being done.
The wildlife and habitat would have been lost without the funding from the Environment Agency and donations.
Because we have this freshwater, brackish and saline marsh here, we want to keep that because it's the most diverse habitat that we could have along this stretch of coastline.
For more stories from across the UK.
Free speech is meaningless unless you allow people you don't like to say things you don't like.
After winning, the people were so proud and it was so intense.
Сказав моїй дружині, треба збиратись, треба піднімати дітей. Почалась війна.
I never thought I was going to be a famous movie person.
When big names talk, they talk to the BBC.
Hello from the BBC Sports Centre, I'm Hugh Ferris. Most of Spain's World Cup winning squad have decided to end their strike, returning to play for the national team after the country's football federation said it would make immediate and profound changes to its structure. Now, only 2 of the 20 players that have been called up, despite their boycott of the team, say that they will not play in the Nations League matches against Sweden and Switzerland in the coming days, following a series of meetings that ran through to the early hours of Wednesday morning at the squad's training camp near Valencia.
Refusing the call-up would mean they would be facing potential sanctions, would be facing something from, economical penalties to even, having their license revoked for, a few years, which would potentially end their careers. So the players went through multiple consultations with, their lawyers, and decided that eventually it was best for them not to risk it and attend. As we saw tonight, there was a very long and intense meeting between the Sporting Council, the Federation and the players to try and reach some sort of agreement that would allow them to move forward.
Would the players think that they have been successful, given the reasons that they were striking in the first place was to try and get some sort of fundamental change at the Federation? Do you think that they would have felt that those negotiations had yielded what they wanted?
Well, we still need to see what the final agreement looks like between, these 3 parties. I think a lot of it will depend on, what happens next over the next few weeks and months, and see if a lot of those promises that cannot be implemented right now really do happen. But I do think that in general, and I'm not just talking about women's sport in Spain, just football in general in Spain, and the situation with the Federation has been a very tough and complicated one for, many years, and just seeing their ability to actually, push for change and even get the Sporting Council in, which hadn't happened before, is probably going to be a reward for them, and they should be very proud.
Holders Manchester City won the first match in defence of their Champions League title, but suffered another injury, leading Pep Guardiola to say that they're in trouble because of them. Bernardo Silva's joining 4 other first-team regulars on the sidelines after coming off during their 3-1 home win over Red Star Belgrade. The victory was not straightforward, though. Osman Bukhari giving the visitors the lead in first-half injury time, but then 2 from Julian Alvarez after the break put City back in front before Guardiola's side secured all 3 points through Rodri's superb finish, and their perfect start to the season continues.
Listen, when we have 5 important, but when I said important, I said really, really important players injured. So sustain that for a long, long time will be difficult, but it's what it is. So So we cannot have with the salaries, with the budgets for the transfer, with the clubs, have 35 players, because you go to the chaos for the clubs, the bankrupt. So it's going to happen.
Elsewhere, Lazio goalkeeper Ivan Provedel provided the story of the night. His last-second equaliser, salvaging a point for his side against Atletico Madrid in Rome. Barcelona comfortably beat Royal Antwerp 5-0 in Group H in what was the Belgian side's first-ever appearance in the competition. Kylian Mbappe and Achraf Hakimi scored in PSG's 2-0 win over Borussia Dortmund. While in the same group, Newcastle United marked their return to the Champions League with a goalless draw against Milan at the San Siro. The pick of Wednesday's Champions League fixtures sees a stuttering Manchester United side travel to Germany to take on Bayern Munich. Erik ten Hag's team missing several first-teamers, including Mason Mount, Harry Maguire and Raphael Varane. But despite both on and off the pitch having their troubles, the manager insists that he is looking forward to taking on the Bundesliga champions.
They leave you also sometimes spaces, but yeah, we are very respectful, and we know Bayern, especially in Champions League, home, especially group stage, they are very strong. But yeah, as you say, but yeah, we're looking forward because we like the challenge, and also we trust ourselves.
United, obviously, they've been going through a bit of a tough spell recently, but sometimes that can be really dangerous because they're looking for a big response, and yeah, we need to be careful of that. We're at home. We want to dictate the game. We want to play the way we want to, but they have some threats as well that we really need to be careful of.
Also later, Arsenal make their return to the Champions League after a 6-year absence against PSV Eindhoven, while in one of the early kickoffs, Real Madrid host the Union Berlin side that were in Germany's second tier just 5 years ago. For more on the rest of the day's fixtures, head to the BBC Sport website. And in Major League Baseball, Shohei Ohtani's season is officially over. After the Los Angeles Angels star had elbow surgery on Tuesday, Ohtani tore a ligament in late August, but continued to bat until a side strain forced him out earlier this month. The Japanese player, who will be a free agent at the end of the season, is expected to make a full recovery in time to both pitch and bat in the next year. And head to our website for more on all those stories, and indeed a look ahead to the third round of pool fixtures at the Rugby World Cup, starting later on Wednesday when Italy play Uruguay. That's bbc.com/sport. Thanks for joining us. That's it for now. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Welcome back. I'm Samantha Simmons. I just want to bring you some breaking news coming into us. This is concerning a story we've been covering all morning about UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak considering weakening key green policies. We understand that he is going to make a statement now outside Downing Street at 4:30, and this is a story that has been going on since last night, and our political editor Chris Mason broke the news that he is considering watering down on these green commitments. Key among them is the government's policy to ban the sale of new diesel and petrol cars by 2030. That is expected to be pushed back to 2035. There's been reaction from the motor industry, some extremely critical of this, from Ford UK saying they need certainty and they've already got their plans in place. And we heard from the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, defending the Prime Minister, even though no official policies or rowing back on policies have been made yet. She says that the government's green policies need to be pragmatic and they don't want to bankrupt people, especially in a cost of living crisis. We will have more on that very shortly, but for now we are being told that the Prime Minister is to hold a news conference at 4:30. He is hosting a conference call right now with his cabinet as well, we understand, to discuss that. And some breaking news on another story we are covering today, and this is the fact that a Metropolitan Police officer is being charged over the murder of a 24-year-old man, Chris Cabba, who was shot last year in South London. We've had a statement from the Metropolitan Police Federation saying being a firearms officer in London is one of the world's toughest jobs. Officers who volunteer for the role know the responsibility and accountability that come with it. The Metropolitan Police Federation notes today's statement from the Crown Prosecution Service in relation to one of our firearms colleagues and make no further comment on that at this time. So we will have more on that story in the news today. Metropolitan Police officer has been charged with the murder of Chris Cabba and will appear in court tomorrow. Now I want to turn to Australia, and the Meteorological Bureau there says large parts of the country are experiencing an unusually hot spring and record temperatures could be set in some areas on Sunday. Australia is the latest country to report abnormal weather in what scientists say is likely to be the hottest year ever recorded. Our correspondent Phil Mercer spoke to us earlier and gave us an update on the heatwave.
We're only just a few weeks into spring here in the Southern Hemisphere, and we have bushfires not only here in the state of New South Wales, the latest count, almost 70 fires burning across New South Wales, more than a dozen out of control. Also, fire authorities in Queensland to the north and on the island state of Tasmania battling fires as well. So this is a very disturbing reminder for many Australians as to the disaster here a few years ago, the Black Summer disaster of 2019-20. Squished an area of Australia the same size as the United Kingdom. Now, the authorities don't expect to repeat this summer, but certainly the bushfires and this extreme heat we've been enduring in eastern Australia is a reminder of what's happened in the past, but also a warning of what might happen in the future. So the authorities believe that come the summer, conditions here in Australia could be extremely unpredictable and dangerous.
Just before we go, I want to show you these pictures of the moment two seal pups got tangled up in a fishing net on a South African beach. Members of the public at West Coast National Park saw they were in distress, cut through the nets to help them, and then the pair were eventually freed and were able to make their way back into the sea. That's it from me. Thanks for watching.
Hello. It's been a windy and for some thoroughly soggy few days out there, especially across the hills of Cumbria and Gwynedd, where some spots have seen well over half a month's worth of rainfall in little over a day. And there's going to be more in the way of rain over the next few days, but there'll become more downpours in that there'll be highly variable amounts of rain around, some sunshine in between, but still, for some of you, strong winds. Now, some of the wettest and windiest conditions for the rest of today tied in with this cold front moving its way eastwards across England and Wales. It's not one coherent band of rain. The rain may be on and off as that comes its way through, but still some very heavy bursts around across southern counties of England, the Midlands, towards East Anglia, and eventually the southeast. And there will be leaving a lot of surface water and spray around on the roads as we head into the evening rush hour, still with gusts in the southeast, 40-50 miles an hour. Better end to the day in the north and west of England and Wales. Only a few showers, a bit more sunshine, certainly compared with the morning. But showers across Scotland, Northern Ireland, with some wetter weather in the South Highlands and the strongest of the winds, maybe gusting 50-60 miles an hour by this stage, making it feel fresh. And for all of us, temperatures this afternoon and evening only a little bit up on where they were this morning. Now, the evening rush hour, not very pleasant at all, East Anglia, southeast. That rain does clear away, though, during the early hours of tomorrow morning. More rain, though, to the north and west of Scotland. In between, with lighter winds, 1 or 2 showers, but more in the way of clear skies. A cooler start to tomorrow morning, 4 or 5 degrees in some rural areas, but a bright and sunny one for the most part. A few showers dotted around these coasts of England and Wales before a few more brew later, especially in southern counties. Scotland, Northern Ireland, greater chance of some outbreaks of rain, initially in the north and west, pushing their way southwards and eastwards and those strong to gale force winds, and that will make it feel cool here, and indeed for all of us, cooler than we've been used to for some time. Then as we go through the night and into Friday, our area of low pressure that's been governing things the past few days still there to the northeast of Scotland. Strongest the winds around that through north and west Scotland, Northern Ireland. Blustery day here with frequent showers. Showers in western parts of England and Wales. Elsewhere, dry and bright start with some sunshine, a little on the cool side to begin with, and a cool day all in all. But showers will blossom more widely through the afternoon, some of those on the heavy side. As they fade though into Friday night, we go into Saturday morning, clear and cool. There could be a touch of frost in some sheltered Scottish glens. Bright, dry day for many, but cloud increasing later. Some more wet and windy weather on Sunday.
Hailed as a way to quit smoking, vaping by teenagers is on the rise.
1 in 5 children say they've tried a vape.
Is it creating a new generation of addicts?
Do you think parents really know what's going on?
I don't think they know the scale of it.
Panorama, teenage vaping, what's the harm? Watch on BBC iPlayer.
The world of film is changing faster and faster all the time. I've been reporting on cinema for more than 40 years. So what's it like to be an Oscar nominee? Our global Talking Movies team
How did that work on set?
brings you up to date on the latest in movie making from around the world.
Looking at stories from other cultures.
Interviewing top filmmakers and stars.
People seem to be emotionally charged by the film.
From blockbusters to art house cinema, we'll spotlight the brilliant and unique voices bringing their stories to the big screen.
Talking Movies. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
Hailed as a way to quit smoking, vaping by teenagers is on the rise.
1 in 5 children say they've tried a vape.
Is it creating a new generation of addicts?
Do you think parents really know what's going on?
I don't think they know the scale of it.
Panorama, teenage vaping, what's the harm? Watch on BBC iPlayer.
Live from London, this is BBC News. One of the world's biggest car makers, Ford, has warned the UK government that pushing back a ban on sales of new petrol and diesel cars will undermine business certainty. In the last few minutes, we've had a confirmation that the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, will make a speech on the government's net zero plans this afternoon. We'll bring that to you live. 24 hours after Azerbaijan's army launched an operation in Nagorno-Karabakh, reports of a ceasefire with ethnic Armenian forces. A Metropolitan Police officer is to be charged over the death of Chris Kaba. He was shot in South London in September last year. And for the first time in the history of the NHS, both consultants and junior doctors are out on strike.
And here in Paris, the streets have just been cleared by police as Emmanuel Macron prepares to welcome King Charles.
Hello, I'm Lucy Hockings. Welcome to BBC News Now. 3 hours of fast-moving news, interviews and reaction. And we start with some breaking news from 10 Downing Street this hour. The Prime Minister is to give a speech this afternoon after briefing Cabinet members on possible changes to carbon reduction policies. Let's take you straight to Damien Grammaticus, our political correspondent. Damien, this news coming to us in the past few minutes or so. Have we had that element confirmed, though? Do we actually know the Prime Minister is going to be addressing net zero and the targets?
Well, we know he's going to hold a sort of press conference, give a speech and take questions in Downing Street at 4:30 p.m. There'd been sort of speculation through the morning that following the leak to the BBC yesterday of this potential big shift in government policy to push back net zero target dates, that the government was sort of scrambling. It was talking to industry, it was talking to other MPs in the last few hours, and all calling for clarity. And what we now see, the Downing Street confirming 4:30 p.m. the Prime Minister will address, certainly it seems, this issue, and seeking to bring some clarity, which the car makers have been calling for. And opposition parties already very critical of any move to change those targets.
Do we know what some of the proposals might be in terms of changing these key green targets, Damien?
Yes, we do. So the central one that has got a lot of attention is that the UK had been saying that by 2030, all petrol and diesel only vehicles would stop being sold, and you'd have to have electric engines. Talk now is about pushing that back to 2035. That's what's caused the upset amongst companies like Ford. Ford this morning talking about a lack of ambition, commitment and consistency from the government because businesses like Ford saying they need certainty, but other targets too, like home efficiency measures that were being talked about, those will not have to come in. Energy efficiency measures, target for 2035, I think it is, for scrapping or for stopping all gas-fired heating systems in houses, that you'd have to install a different type of more energy efficient system. That could be pushed back as well. It's just some of a number of things, 7 or 8 measures in total that could be in this, but we should be clear at 4:30.
Damien, great to see you. We will, of course, bring everyone that press conference live at 4:30. Reminder for you, though, the aim of net zero is for the UK to take out of the atmosphere as many greenhouse gases as it puts in. We're going to be looking at those net zero targets throughout the day as well, comparing them to what is happening around the rest of the world, and also asking the key political questions to why Rishi Sunak may be wanting to water down some of those commitments. But for now, let's take you to one of the globe's longest running conflicts. In the latest upsurge of fighting, 27 people have died, hundreds more injured, and now it appears that Azerbaijan, which is seeking full control of Nagorno-Karabakh, and the Armenians who inhabit part of it, have agreed to a ceasefire. We have latest pictures from there that show around 2,000 people being moved to safety. Russia is a former power in the region. It says it's offered humanitarian and medical assistance. But the fighting has been intense. This is a video filmed in Stepanakert, which is the capital of Armenian-controlled Nagorno-Karabakh. You can see there the smoke rising, and there's been the sound of shelling. Also, we could hear that in the distance. The conflict hasn't been going well for Armenia. The government has warned of large-scale unrest, and the protest that you're seeing right now took place on Tuesday evening. It got quite violent at times. It was outside a government building in the capital, Yerevan. The demonstrators saying they're angered by the government's handling of the situation. So before we go any further, a quick explainer about actually what is going on here, and to remind you of the strategic significance of Nagorno-Karabakh. It lies in the mountainous South Caucasus region. It's at the heart of a bitter ethnic dispute. The territory is recognised internationally as part of Azerbaijan. Large areas, though, of it have been controlled by ethnic Armenians for 3 decades. Azerbaijan and Armenia fought a bloody war over the territory in the late 1980s and the early 1990s. Russia, which previously oversaw both countries as part of the USSR, has previously sent peacekeepers. But fears of fresh violence came when Azerbaijan mounted an effective blockade of a vital route into the enclave in December 2022. So we were getting all these reports just a few hours ago that a ceasefire had been agreed, and BBC World Service's Tim Franks spoke to someone, Mazrat Vanyan. He's a journalist. He's in that town I mentioned, Stepanakert. And even though we'd heard these reports of a ceasefire, as you can now hear, there was still the sound of very loud incoming explosions coming in. Have a listen.
Great to speak to you. Thank you very much for your time. Tell me...
Yeah, it's like that.
Right, I can hear the explosions. What's going on?
Yeah. About half hours ago was a little bit calm, but as you can see, it started again. All the night I didn't sleep. All the night massive shellings we heard, and we just spent night at the shelter. A lot of families with the little kids there, and hard to breathe. You know, very, very difficult situation. Moms, kids everyone is crying, and in the morning also, early in the morning was started again. And I was running to home to take my passport to keep it with me, and I saw women again crying, running through the empty streets. No one is understanding what's going on.
So a lot of confusion on the ground, but let's take you to our correspondent in Tbilisi who covers the Caucasus, Rayhan Dmitry, who joins us from there. Rayhan, we're just getting a line out of Moscow actually that says that President Putin is hoping for a peaceful resolution in this conflict, but a lot of uncertainty on the ground. What are you hearing from Nagorno-Karabakh? Is the ceasefire in place?
Well, the ceasefire, according to the document that was signed by the ethnic Armenian leadership of Nagorno-Karabakh, was supposed to be in place from 1 p.m. local time. But there are some reports on social media about ongoing fire that people could hear. But the picture is not really clear. What we know is that earlier today, it appears that the leadership of Nagorno-Karabakh have surrendered completely. They have signed this agreement that was mediated by Russia and the Russian peacekeeping contingent, which is in Nagorno-Karabakh after 2020 war. And there are three main points. The first point is that they have agreed to lay down their arms. And they said that they agreed for complete withdrawal of any Armenian soldiers, any soldiers of the Armenian armed forces. And that is despite the denials by the Republic of Armenia that it had any military presence remaining in Nagorno-Karabakh. And the third point in this ceasefire agreement is that tomorrow, on Thursday, representatives of Karabakh Armenians are scheduled to meet Azerbaijani representatives in the Azerbaijani town of Yevluch, and start negotiations about the future of Karabakh Armenians, about their reintegration, and their safety and security in Nagorno-Karabakh.
Could you explain to us the role that Russia now plays? They've helped mediate the ceasefire. Presumably troops will be on the ground trying to enforce it, Rayhan, but what is the relationship particularly between Russia and Armenia like at the moment?
Well, between Russia and Armenia, the relationship are not that great, to be fair. I've managed to see just a bit of a statement that came through from the Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. And he said that they were not part of these negotiations for a ceasefire that was reached. And in the last 24 hours, and actually in the last few days, we've been hearing a lot of Russian commentators actually accusing and blaming Armenia for the current situation. But it appears that Russia has now helped to negotiate the ceasefire agreement. But there are a lot of questions, Lucy, remain. Who will be representing Karabakh Armenians? Because Azerbaijan has so far been referring to the authorities in Nagorno-Karabakh as a puppet regime, and they do not recognize the legitimacy of the Karabakh Armenian authorities. So who will be representing Karabakh Armenians in these talks in Azerbaijan? And also the question is, will there be any international mediators in these talks?
Rayhan, great to get that update from you. Thanks for joining us from Tbilisi. We'll be bringing you more on that conflict throughout the day as well. But let's update you on our developing story. News that the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak will give a speech in Downing Street at 16:30 local time. This is after the BBC reported government plans to significantly change the government's net zero policies. The BBC revealing on Tuesday he was considering watering down environmental pledges, including delaying the ban on the sale of new petrol and diesel cars. We have our climate editor, Justin Rowlett, who is with me, Damien Grammaticus, our political correspondent, also standing by. But Justin, I wanted to start with you. We toss around these phrases sometimes, and I think sometimes they also need explanation. What is net zero?
Net zero means putting no additional greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So the hope is in the future we'll reduce emissions as close to zero as we can get. Any emissions that remain, we'll find ways of taking them out of the atmosphere, and there are technologies that would do that. So the net emissions would be zero, adding no new carbon.
And what has the UK's commitment been to that pledge?
So we have said that we will, there's an legally binding commitment made by Theresa May, a Tory Prime Minister back in 2019. She said we would reach net zero by 2050. So very clear commitment. We've actually been quite good at cutting emissions. We've cut, I've just been looking at the figures, it's 48.7% emissions down from UK emissions since 1990. That's quite dramatic. That's better than most G7, the big economies in the world. We're doing better than most of them, although Germany's accelerated since 2015. But we are, doing quite well. When Rishi Sunak talks about UK leadership on the issue, we have been very good on climate so far.
So then how damaging will it be to that position that the UK is at the moment in a leadership role if it's seen that he is going to be watering down some of these pledges?
There are a number of ways of looking at that. The first point we have to make is that he is considering these various different things. We don't know what he's actually going to do, and we won't know that until 4:30 UK time when he's going to make the speech. I mean, some of them are quite significant. For example, changing the commitment on a ban on pure petrol and diesel cars by 2030. That's something the car industry has pushed back very hard on. There are other, also talking about watering down the commitment on heat pumps. Obviously, the effect they'd have depends on future consumption patterns, the cost of electric vehicles, the cost of heat pumps, that kind of thing. So it's very hard to say. But what we can say is that the Climate Change Committee, the UK's government's independent advisors on climate, are already warning that progress on cutting emissions has become worryingly slow, and they've already warned that the UK is in danger of not meeting its existing 2050 net zero target.
Justin, thanks so much for that. We do have a live page up and running for you on the website as well, bbc.com, just following all the developments on this story. So do log on and take a look.
BBC Bite Size has everything from my life
to my discoveries.
Gravity!
There are even games to help you learn.
So, from preschool
to smashing exams, we make homework more appealing. No?
Screens. It's what's on them that counts. Learn now on BBC Bite Size.
Welcome to breakfast.
Thanks for joining us.
Good morning to you. Great to have you.
Hello.
Good morning.
Morning, Johnny.
Hey there.
I'm so excited.
Right, let's go live.
Oh, Carol.
Lovely to see you
Oh,
this
thank
morning.
you.
It makes me laugh every single day.
Well, it's going to be a glorious day today.
Happy rush hour, everybody.
I'd just like to thank BBC Breakfast.
Start your day the BBC Breakfast way on BBC One and iPlayer.
Time now to focus on the politics of the day. Elizabeth Glinker here with Politics Live.
A big political row about climate change, the future of HS2, and will the EU really give us a better deal? This is Politics Live. Joining me, the Conservative MP Angela Richardson, Labour Mayor for the West of England, Dan Norris, Naomi Smith from the Best for Britain, which campaigns for a closer relationship with the EU, and Kate Andrews, who's the economics editor at The Spectator. Today, from cars to gas boilers, Rishi Sunak is thinking about making big changes to his net zero policies.
We're not going to save the country by bankrupting the British people.
Now Rishi Sunak is U-turning via leaks and midnight statements from the bunker at Downing Street.
The Prime Minister has been criticised and praised by his own MPs.
My reaction this morning is one of real concern. What has been trailed suggests a significant change in our policy.
The Prime Minister obviously has realised that some of those targets were not unachievable, but actually were going to impact, the common man and woman on the streets.
If we are privileged enough to be elected into power, I intend to build on that relationship.
Keir Starmer has met President Macron, but is a better Brexit deal really on offer?
This is about finally making a rapid connection from the West Midlands to the Northern Powerhouse, to Liverpool, to Manchester, to Leeds.
This high-speed rail line was meant to reach the north of England, but will that ever happen? Hello, and we start with that big story that was broken overnight by the BBC that Rishi Sunak is considering weakening key green policies, watering down its pledges on net zero and using a more proportionate way, a more proportionate course of action. He would push back the ban on the sale of petrol and diesel cars and potentially also make similar moves with gas boilers. Now, unusually, we did get a response from the Prime Minister last night. We can see that statement now. Here, Rishi Sunak saying, for many years, politicians in governments of all stripes have not been honest about the costs and trade-offs. No leak, of course, referring to the BBC story there, will stop me beginning the process of telling the country how and why we need to change. He goes on to say we are committed to net zero by 2050 and the agreements we have made internationally, but doing so in a better and more proportionate way. So my question to the panel, really, to Angela, is this the right time to be changing policy?
I think what's really important is that, number one, we're keeping that commitment of net zero by 2050. It's a legally binding agreement. But we're going to do that in a pragmatic and practical way that takes the British public with us. I think leaks aren't helpful. We're going to get some more detail later on this afternoon. At the moment, it's just speculation. So we can't actually say too much on that right now. But I think it's important that the public has clarity, but also that they understand that the Prime Minister is willing to do the right thing by people. He will take long-term decisions, be honest, rather than short-term political objectives, which may work for today, but not for tomorrow.
Yeah, well, as you say, we now know we're going to hear Rishi Sunak is due to speak at 4:30 this afternoon. Dan, is it the right time to be changing policy?
It's not, but look, this is terribly orchestrated. I can't believe this hasn't been leaked from Number 10, to be very honest. The whole timing, the speculation, now we've got this announcement about 4:30. So that's very concerning because this is really serious. The cost is to the planet and the cost is to the people because we won't get the growth we'd otherwise have or need for our country. Great Britain PLC depends on a lot of very high technologies that are very transferable into dealing with the climate emergency. And if we're not part of that, while the rest of the world, America, puts billions into its new industries for the future, for climate change, same with Europe, billions of euros, and yet here we are being told that we're going to scale back, go backwards at a time when all the evidence, all the weather patterns even, are telling us that things are more urgent than ever.
Kate, is this the right time? Because we